So in this video we'll be going through simple mathematical notation. Now when it comes to maths notation we use symbols to replace words or instructions. So the most common maths notation is basically the four operators. So plus, so this little cross sign obviously means plus, or it can mean add, or it can mean sum. The little vertical horizontal line means minus, subtract, or the difference, and it's sometimes used to work out how much more or how much less a particular value is to another. Little x means multiplied times or the product of two things. Obviously this division symbol means divide and share, and obviously an equal sign basically means equals or the answer, where you've got two horizontal lines underneath each other. Now these are probably the most commonly used symbols that we use in mathematics. However, there are several others, and so let's just go through a few of them. Now some of the most common ones that you're most likely to use is going to be the inequalities. Now if you have an arrow pointing to the left, that basically means that it means less than. Now there's different ways in which you can establish, and I know that from the students I've taught that it can get very confusing and remembering which means what. Now generally speaking, usually the more sort of politically correct way would be imagining a mouth, or a crocodile's mouth, and the crocodile always eats whichever number is bigger. However, more controversially, you can always think to yourself, although I totally do not condone bullying, that if you're going to pick on someone, you pick on someone smaller. So the arrow always points at whichever is smaller. Now, whichever way you sort of imagine that, just make sure you're getting it correct. So for example, a typical question might give you, let's say, a 6 and an 8, and what you need to do is you need to put a correct symbol in there. So looking at this, you can either say, well, if the crocodile eats the bigger number, then the mouth is going to be facing the 8, or you can imagine that if a bully is going to pick on someone, they pick on the smaller number or smaller person, so the arrow is going to be pointing at the right number. So here what you need to make sure that you're doing is you're using the correct, so don't get the two things confused. Don't get that the crocodile eats the smaller child. That's going to be a complete failure. So try and make sure you understand and can interpret what each of these inequality symbols mean. Now when you've got an inequality with a line underneath it, basically means that it can also equal that number. Now if you think to yourself, well, when would I ever use that particular symbol? Well, you tend to use it more in algebra rather than with numbers, because obviously when you've got two numbers, a number is either going to be less than, more than, or equal to. So it's not going to be that use of that. So we tend to use this symbol of less or equal to or more than equal to when it moves on to algebra. Now obviously if you've got an arrow pointing from left to right, then that means more than. Again, if you're familiar with the insurance company, that's where they get their symbol from. Now obviously if you've got a line underneath that means it can either mean more or equal to. Now the next ones are probably the less common mathematical symbols that you're probably familiar with. So if you have an equal sign with a line going through it, then that basically means that it's not equal to. So for example, if I had 4 plus 3 and I had an 8, now obviously 4 plus 3 is not equal to 8, so I could put a line through it, and that basically means that the two sides are not equal to each other. Another symbol that you're probably aware of, now if you do geography, I remember we were doing map notations, that this would usually represent a church. However, in maths, when you've got a plus sign and a subtraction sign, it means just that. It means plus or minus. Now I would say this, you would only see this symbol in high level mathematics, but if you do basically see it, then basically it means plus and add. So if you had 6 plus minus 8, then that could either mean 6 plus 8, which would give you 14, or it could mean 6 minus 8, which gives you an answer of minus 2. So this plus minus symbol basically means just that. Now the word infinity, or the symbol of infinity, is like a horizontal 8, and that just represents infinity. Obviously infinity is the biggest number that we can imagine, and you also can have minus infinity by sticking a minus sign in front. So you can have positive and negative infinity, and again this usually you can commonly seen when you're dealing with trigonometry or high level trigonometry at high level maths. Now a little circle above a number which acts like a power. Now sometimes it's not going to be to the power of 0, although that is a thing. So for example, a little symbol there, if it's related to temperature, will mean degrees Celsius. If it's dealing with an angle, then that would mean there. So this little circle means degrees. Now if it was a 0, then that would mean 2 to the power of 0, which is a thing. Now you probably visit this more at high level maths, but 2 to the power of 0 is completely different to 2 with a little circle. Now if you're ever unsure in an exam, then always check with the personal invigilator or a teacher as to which it's going to be, but it's usually relative to the question. So if you're dealing with angles, it's going to refer to an angle. If it's referring to temperature, it will refer to temperature. If it's a question related to powers, then it will be a 0 rather than a degree symbol. Now the next symbol we move on to is looking at this symbol here, which is pi. Now you'll find this symbol on your calculator, and again this is relating to circles. So if you're doing any work involving circles, then this is where this symbol will come in. It's also known as the logo for Pizza Hut, obviously because pizzas are circular, and obviously pi, pizza, that's the link. Now sometimes with algebra, to differentiate between letters and actual methods, that they tend to use the Greek alphabet. Now again, the Greek alphabet is generally used at A level or high level maths, but again it's something that is commonly used in mathematics. So if you see this little alpha sign, which is usually like a little fish symbol, or written, or it could look like a general A, then it's something just to bear in mind. And that also leads into beta, which is written like so, when again all they are doing is just representing variables, so representing like just normal letters that we write in English. Now this symbol here is like a backwards, it's like an E symbol or a backwards 3, but actually is represented by delta, which is again another Greek letter. It's like an uppercase letter. Now delta in maths basically means the sum of all the total of. So if I have, let's say, a column of x, and I'm writing down 4, 6, 8, 10, then if I had sigma x, then basically what this means, it means the total of x values. So what I will do is just simply add these numbers up. So this would be 28, so that would equal 28. So if I had a column that has h and I had loads of numbers and I had sigma h, then that would basically mean the sum of all of these h values. And again, sum means where you're adding, in which you're then therefore working out the total. Now obviously if you see this number here, which we call theta, and that's how it's pronounced, which is again is another Greek letter, and that theta represents degrees or an angle, let's say. So in terms of this, it also refers to an angle, and again this is generally used more in trigonometry. So if you have absolutely no idea what I mean by trigonometry, then you do not need to worry about that symbol. Now if you see a little angle, then that basically means just that, it just means an angle. So if I had a triangle and the vertices were labelled A, B and C, then if I want to represent this angle here, then that would be the angle of A, B and C. You can also represent this angle as A, B and C with a little hat on B, so the little angle is on top of B, which represents the angle created from starting at A, then going to B and then going to C. So it's a case of, let me get more distinctive colour. So angle ABC is the starting at A, going to B and then going to C, and the angle is that created by those going to those 3 points. Now another symbol that you may also be familiar with is, or may incur, is this equal sign that's actually got 3 lines. Now this basically means it's an identity and is again used more in algebra, and basically means that it can be written identically as. So if you're familiar with brackets, so for example if I had 3x plus 2, and again if I multiplied these out, in which I'd get 3x plus 6, then I could write that with 3 lines because this is also equal to this. For any value that I swap x for in this, it's going to give me the exact same answer as if I substitute the same value of x into that expression on the right. So it's just a case of just being aware of what these symbols mean. Now I'll be honest, depending on what level of maths you are working at, you won't see half of these symbols, but these are generally symbols that you would generally see at higher GCSE in total. But obviously if you're working at year 7, 8 and 9, then you're going to see a fraction of these particular symbols. If you're looking at foundation GCSE, then again you will only need some of these symbols. And again, if you're not too sure, always check with your teacher as to which symbols that you need to be aware of. But I would say the most important ones are going to be the inequalities, so less than, less or equal to, more than, more or equal to, It's always good to know what not equals to also means, and sum of. I would say if you can get your grips with those 4 types of notations, let's put a little pink bubble around it so you know between the two, then I would say apart from plus minus, plus minus, multiplying, dividing, these are probably the most commonly used symbols that you are going to use, obviously along with pi as well, but that represents a number. So let's have a look at some practice questions that you're likely to get relating to mathematical notation. So in these questions, what we need to do is it's saying which one of the symbols of less than, more than, or equals to will make the statement true. So for this, what we're going to need to do is to input one of these 3 symbols to make it correct. So looking at this then, now remembering whichever you prefer, I always tend to remember the more controversial one, and again, just a little disclaimer, I do not condone bullying, none whatsoever. So again, I'm always the arrow always points at the smaller number. So between 8 and 3, which number is smaller? 3 is smaller. So let me just get a pen and I can mark that on here. Obviously with question B, which is smaller, -2 or -6? Which temperature is going to be warmer? Which one's going to be colder? So again, which one's smaller? That's going to be -6. Now with question C, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work these out. So 5 plus 7 is 12, and 17 minus 5 is also 12. So that there is going to be equals. And then here, what's -9 and -4? Add these symbols. Well, -9 is smaller, so I'm just going to simply enter those in. And again, I can easily confirm each of those answers. So let's just write them in. So here I'm going to use my keyboard because this is a computer program, and we're just going to fill in the gaps. And hope that they are correct, and yes they are. So let's just quickly rub out these because it's going to come on the other screen, and let's move on to the second question. So let's have a look at what these questions are. So again, with these questions, all I need to do here is just work out the answers first. So let's do that. So here I've got 4 minus 3, which is 1. 7 take away 2 is 5. 2 plus 3 is 5. Minus 1 plus 6 is 5. 3 plus 5 is 8. 9 take away 2 is 7. Minus 6 plus 4 is -2. And 5 take away 1 is -1. So looking at the numbers I've written in pink, all I now need to do is enter these correct in these symbols. So again, remember that the arrow always points at the smaller number. So 1 is smaller than 5. 5 and 5 are equal to each other. 7 is smaller, -2 is smaller. So what I'm then going to do is now enter these symbols in their respective positions, and hopefully again these should all be correct, which they are. So again, let's just quickly rub out everything done before we move on to the next question. So looking at question 3, I'm going to do the exact same. So here it's a little bit more obvious. I'm going to go straight into working the answer. So which one is smaller, 12 or 21? That's going to be 12. So the arrow is going to be pointing at the 12. Which one's smaller between -5 and -7? Well, -7 is smaller. So then I'm pointing at that one. 12 take away 3 is 8. So, is 9. So 8 is smaller. So the arrow is going to be pointed towards the 8. And then here I've got 15 plus 3, which is 18. 2 plus 9, which is also 18. So they are equal to each other. So again, all I'm going to do is write down equals, and I've got all 4 questions correct. So moving on to question 4, again I'm going to follow the same format. So here I just need to decide whether which one's smaller, which one's bigger. So again, I'm going to opt for the option that the arrow always points at the smaller number. So which one's smaller between 3 and 8? The 3 is. Which one's smaller between 4 and -2? That's going to be -2. And which one's smaller, -3 or -9? It's going to be -9. Now again, just be wary that even though with negative numbers, the bigger the digit with negative numbers, the smaller it is. So try not to get confused between just that, and try and visualize the number line and seeing which one's which. And let's just quickly mark those, and they are all 3 correct. So again, we're going to follow the same format with these questions. So here, which one's smaller, 7 or 17? 17 is smaller. Which one's smaller between -2 and 0? -2 is smaller. Now here we've got 5 take away 4, which is 1. So what's smaller, 1 or -5? The answer will be -5. And again, 4 marks there. So for question 6, again, going to follow the same format. So which one's smaller, 5 or 13? 5 is smaller. And again, remember that the inequality always points at whichever one is smaller. Which is smaller between 6 and -5? -5 is smaller. Now here we're moving with decimals. Now again, be careful with decimals, because here we've got 0.35, which you would probably may say is 0.35. Then this you would say is 0.5. And you think, 35 is bigger than 5, so 0.5 should be smaller, when actually it isn't. So here we've got 3.5 and we've got 0.5. Now when you're working with a mixture of decimal places, try and make sure that you're writing each number so they've both got the same number of numbers after the decimal point. So 0.35 with 2 numbers after the decimal point, and if you want to do is just add a 0. So here I'm comparing 0.35 to 0.50. Now with decimals, I would always recommend that you try and relate this to money. So think to yourself, okay, well if this is looking at money, that's 35 pence and that's going to be 50 pence. So which one is going to be smaller? Well, 0.35 is going to be smaller. So let me just quickly rub all of this out in case I forget. So looking at the 2, which is smaller? 0.35. But try not to get caught out by that, by recognizing that obviously this is 35 pence and that would be 50 pence. Moving on to the last one, which one's smaller? -24 or -20? The answer would be -24. And there, if we check our answers, should get all 4 correct. Now moving on to question 7. So this question says you must be 1.4 meters tall or more to ride a roller coaster. Which of the following expresses the sentence above mathematically? So here we're looking at height. Now what this question is saying, now height is written on the left of all of these 4 options. So what does this mean rewriting this question using the word height? So basically what it's saying is that your height must be more than, what should I say, more or equal to 1.4 meters. Now more or equal to is going to be facing that direction and it's going to have a line next to it. So this is going to be option B. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select option B and hope it's correct, which it is. So again, I'm just going to quickly rub all this out because this is going to translate into the next question. And let's move on to question 8. So question 8, it says you must be 21 years of age or over to enter. So your age must be more or equal to. Well, in this case, it's a case of equal to or more. So if I translate this statement, it basically means equal or more. Now mathematically, we write that as more or equal to, which is why I'm struggling to say this out loud, because I'm more often than saying more or equal to rather than equal or more. So which of these symbols represents that your age is more or equal to, or how they've written this question, equal or more to 21? Well, more or equal to is like so, because your age has got to be bigger or the same as 21. So here again, our answer is going to be option B. And again, that gives me the correct answer. So let's just quickly rub all of this out. We'll move on to question 9. So question 9 says, fill in a positive integer that make the statement true. Now the word positive means that we can't have negative numbers, and integer is just a more mathematical word for whole numbers. So in other words, we don't want a decimal number. Now for this, we want a number that is less than 3. So we want any whole number that is less or 3. So I could choose any number between 2 all the way up to 0, controversially 1. Now I would say, to play it safe, I would just go for 2, and that's exactly what I'm going to go for. And then the next one, it says fill in a negative integer. So here we want a negative number and a whole number at that. So let's just So represent this as an integer is just a whole number, so not a decimal number that is bigger than -3. So -3, -2, -1. So these are my two options. And again, I'm just going to play it safe by going for -2. So let's just fill that in as -2. So again, I could either go for -1 or -2, but I'm going to go for -2. Submit my answer, and I've put 3 in there, so that's going to be, need to put 2, and there is my right and final answer. And the last one here with question 10, it says that a charitable organisation has the following statement in its constitution. It says members must be 18 or over to take part in any vote related to the association. Which of these express the group of members that cannot vote? Now the important thing here is the word cannot. So who can't vote is people who are aged, and it's going to be 18 or over, so 17 or less. Now what's another way of saying 17 or less is under 18, because obviously 18 is not included in under 18. So what I want to do is find out which of these values where the age is less than 18. So which of these symbols represents this, and that is going to be, again, option B. So I'm going to select option B, and that gives me my final answer. So these are the types of questions that will generally involve you working with simple mathematical notation.